This is Pedro Sánchez, the president of Spain. A socialist at heart, with a taste for international summits, elegant dinners, and applause from Brussels. A politician who calls himself progressive, a defender of the people, and a champion of social welfare. A guy who could give a 20-minute speech without saying absolutely anything and still make you believe he saved the planet. And while he keeps repeating that everything he does is for the most vulnerable, poverty, debt, and polarization indicators keep rising. Trump doesn't believe in redistributing wealth. And this is Donald Trump. He doesn't believe in redistributing wealth. He believes in multiplying it. While some want to divide the pie, he asks, why don't we just make 10 more pies? There's one thing about him that can't be denied. He represents capitalism in its purest, rawest, and most profitable form. Pedro applies the socialist system in his country, just like Maduro and Kim Il-sung. But what is socialism? Socialism is a political and economic system where the state controls totally or partially the means of production, factories, land, and resources, with the idea of distributing wealth more equitably among everyone. Instead of companies being private and profit-driven, the government organizes the economy to supposedly prioritize collective well-being. The state distributes resources according to each person's needs, not according to their ability to produce or consume. It upholds several core principles centered on equality, social justice, and collective control of resources. Economic equality, collective or state ownership, equitable wealth distribution, universal access to basic services, and the end of exploitative capitalism. In theory, everyone collaborates, everyone receives. In practice, everyone waits and the state distributes as it sees fit. Thus, it fights capitalism, using iPhones, social media, and Che t-shirts made in China. Fashion revolution. Socialism wants everyone to live well, no matter how much they have or earn, and believes this is achieved by removing power from the market and giving it to the state. Currently in Spain, what distinguishes Pedro Sánchez's administration is the expansion of the state's role through increased public spending, subsidies, direct aid, and higher tax pressure on high incomes and certain strategic sectors. He has also promoted social reforms aimed at influencing the country's culture and political language, with strong ideological content on issues like gender, historical memory, and education. In short, Pedro Sánchez's socialism isn't about transforming the economic system at its root, but about using it as a vehicle to consolidate a political project that privileges interventionism, state dependency, and institutional control without fully acknowledging the long-term consequences this may bring for individual freedom, competitiveness, and fiscal stability. The consequences of Pedro Sánchez's socialist model in Spain are already starting to show, and they could deepen if the current course continues. More and more citizens depend on subsidies, aid, and public benefits to sustain their finances. A culture of dependency is created instead of effort, which in the long term reduces productivity and individual autonomy. Public spending has grown rapidly, especially in subsidies and new administrative structures. Public debt already exceeds 110% of GDP, which jeopardizes the country's financial sustainability. The more spending without sufficient revenue, the more pressure there will be to raise taxes, or to slash brutally in the future. Some large companies have already moved their tax headquarters or part of their investment to other countries for fear of excessive tax pressure. Tax hikes on energy companies, tech firms, or banks generate uncertainty and discourage investment. Why do socialist countries have closed borders, but their leaders travel abroad? Why do the people liberated by socialism end up fleeing en masse to capitalist countries? While some travel for luxury, others do it out of necessity. Since Chavismo took hold, more than 7.7 million Venezuelans have fled the country. UN data 2024. They walk thousands of kilometers across borders to Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Chile, or Brazil. Some cross the Darien jungle with children in their arms. They flee hunger, repression, and a lack of future. The Bolivarian Revolution promised dignity and ended up forcing its people to sleep in bus terminals in foreign countries. How desperate must someone be to risk all that if their country claims to be the best system in the world?
Nosotros no queremos ser ricos. Ser rico es malo, es inhumano. Así lo digo y condeno a los ricos. Una de él me dice, caramba, usted no ha comprendido la revolución. La revolución se trata de mantener a los pobres pobres, pero con esperanza. Y mientras nosotros hacemos el discurso de la defensa de los pobres, no lo podemos sacar a la clase media, porque dejan de ser pobres y pasan a ser nuestro enemigo.
In Spain, while many Spaniards leave out of necessity, their president travels by conviction or political strategy. One seeks a better future, the other global projection. Both travel, but for very different reasons. And that alone says a lot about the system's priorities. President Pedro Sánchez has been one of Europe's most active leaders in foreign policy, with a schedule full of international trips. While some of these trips have been part of legitimate summits and diplomatic missions, others have been criticized for their cost, lack of tangible results, or for taking place at politically sensitive times. Although Spain is a modern and developed country, there has been a constant emigration of citizens, especially young people, for economic, professional, and social reasons. This migration intensified after the financial crisis, but has continued even under progressive governments like Pedro Sánchez's. Paradoxically, this happens despite living under one of the highest social spending systems in Europe, which raises an uncomfortable question: does the model really work if the best prepared youth choose to build their future elsewhere? So, what's happening? Socialism is going to destroy the world, because it promises paradise but delivers queues, misery, and a 4-hour speech blaming capitalism. It kills motivation and effort. If everyone earns the same, whether they work or not, why bother trying? Result: less productivity and less innovation. On top of that, the state controls everything, and when that happens, everything works like airport Wi-Fi: slow, expensive, and never available. In the name of equality, socialism begins to decide what you think, what you eat, and even what memes you're allowed to share. It triggers mass migration. It creates humanitarian crises. It divides societies with ideological hatred. And on top of that, it makes you feel guilty for not clapping while everything sinks. Freedom is only allowed if approved by the Ministry of Correct Thoughts. So, everyone is equally impoverished, except for those at the top, because in every socialist country, there's an elite that lives like royalty. When socialism fails, it's never the system's fault. It's the fault of the blockade, the empire, the IMF, your grandma, Netflix, anyone but them. Cuba is proof of what years of socialism cause. And it's not a socialist country in transition. It's a failed experiment that turned revolution into routine and equality into collective misery. For decades, Cuba was the symbol of socialist revolution in Latin America, a country that promised equality, social justice, and sovereignty against imperialism. But today, that promise has become a daily nightmare. Miguel Díaz-Canel is not a reformist leader. He is the symbol of continuity for a model that can no longer survive, not even with repression or speeches. Since 2018, Miguel Díaz-Canel has held the presidency of Cuba, appointed by the Communist Party to continue the legacy of the Castro brothers. He was not elected through free voting or open elections. In Cuba, there is only one legal party, and the president is ratified by the National Assembly, which is also controlled by that same single party. Díaz-Canel presents himself as a digital reformist, but he governs under the same iron rules that defined Castroism. No press freedom, no legal opposition, no plural elections, and whoever disagrees ends up silenced, imprisoned, or in exile. But there are also other cases, though a minority, of moderate socialism or welfare states in Europe. A notable example of moderate socialism or a welfare state in Europe is Sweden, especially during the second half of the 20th century. It's often held up as proof that socialism can work, but that interpretation is often incomplete. Here's the explanation. For decades, Sweden was seen as the perfect model of a welfare state. A country with high-quality public services, education, healthcare, pensions, and one of the highest tax burdens in the world. From the outside, many consider it socialist. But in reality, Sweden is the myth that socialism works because it combined a highly capitalist economy with strong public policies. So, what did Sweden do? Free market and high taxes. Businesses are private, property is protected, and there is economic freedom. But very high taxes are applied to fund state services. Massive investment in public services, healthcare, education, and pensions were universal and generous. This was possible because the country had a highly productive economy and a small population. Strong but cooperative unions. Unions have a lot of power, but they coordinate with the government and businesses to avoid destructive conflict. Sweden is not a socialist country, it's a capitalist country with strong welfare policies, which corrected its course when the state became too large and costly. Its success wasn't because it embraced socialism, but because it avoided it in time. Where socialism takes root, dreams wither. Not because the idea is bad, but because when power is concentrated in the name of the people lose their power. And when freedom is sacrificed for empty promises, the only thing that grows is control. History has already spoken, and it spoke loudly. Every country that embraced extreme socialism paid with lost generations, because what starts with promises ends with closed borders and even more tightly closed mouths. Entire countries remain trapped in models that failed time and again. This video is not a condemnation, it's a warning. Because where extreme socialism settles, freedom begins to disappear. The problem with socialism is not just economic, it's human. Because in the name of justice, it can destroy freedom. This government will work for the common good. For a Spain where no one is left behind. Against those who defend privileges, we defend rights. Against those who cut services, we strengthen the welfare state. This is the only path to advance social justice and territorial cohesion. We do not believe in an economy that serves a few, but in an economy that serves the majority. And that is the Spain we will build. With democratic resolve and with hope as our banner. Pedro Sánchez.